Welcome to Coffee with Viking. I am Mike. Cheers. And here's some more of the Book of Daniel breakdown before we go into the next part of applying the Book of Daniel to your life. Sweet and sour dreams. Daniel 2:5. If you don't tell me what my dream was and what it means, you will be torn limb from limb. King Nebuchadnezzar has two dreams. The first is so troubling that he is fully prepared to kill every palace advisor if one of them can't interpret the dream for him. And to make sure the dream specialist isn't just pretending to interpret the dream, he insists that the interpreter prove himself by telling the king what he dreamed. And to be honest, that would not be possible except for the fact that Daniel had God backing him up and did a lot of praying and went in and was able to tell the king his dream and interpret it. The dream specialists draw a blank, so the king orders all of his advisors executed, including Daniel. The first that Daniel hears of this is when guards come to arrest him. Not yet considered a dream specialist, he manages to convince the desperate king to give him time to consider the matter. Daniel and his friends pray, and God reveals the dream to Daniel, who immediately reports it to the king. In his dream, the king saw a huge and terrifying statue of a man topped with a head of gold. The statue's material diminishes in value as it moves downward. A silver chest, arms of bronze, belly and thighs that are iron, bronze belly and thighs, iron legs, clay and iron mixture for the feet. A single rock cut from a mountain shatters the statue. Daniel says the statue's golden head represents the king and his great Babylonian empire. The other three metals represent inferior kingdoms that will come later. Some scholars point to Medes, Persians, and Greeks. Daniel says the mountain rock comes from God, who will eventually destroy all other kingdoms and set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed or conquered. In dream number 2, the king sees a huge tree that provides fruit and shade for the entire world. But then a messenger from heaven chops it down in what reads like a mixed metaphor. The messenger declares that the tree will go temporarily insane, having the mind of a wild animal instead of the mind of a human. Dreams about a world tree show up in other ancient writings and often represent an empire. But in this case, Daniel says the tree represents the king. He will lose his mind, and for a time he'll behave like an animal, eating grass and living outdoors. This happens a year later while the king is standing on the flat roof of his palace, surveying his kingdom and bragging about how great he is. It's unclear how long the insanity lasts. Daniel simply calls it 7 periods of time, perhaps months, seasons, years, or as long as God considers necessary. 7 symbolizes completion in the Bible. God rested on day 7 after creation. However long the insanity lasts, it's long enough for the king's hair to grow as long as eagle's feathers and for his nails to look like bird's claws. Fingernails on average grow about 1.5 inches a year. A 1-inch nail starts looking clawish. There's no report of Nebuchadnezzar being sick for a long time, but the Greek historian Megasthenes, who lived about 200 years later, reports that Nebuchadnezzar climbed to his palace roof one day and was inspired by God. This might be a reference to his insanity. Since the ancients sometimes looked on insanity as the opposite of demon possession, divine possession, or it might refer to what happens next in the king's life. When his insanity subsides, he turns from bragging about himself to bragging about the Most High God, whose rule is everlasting and his kingdom is eternal. Fireproof Jews. Look, Nebuchadnezzar shouted, I see 4 men unbound walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god. Daniel 3:25. Daniel's 3 Jewish friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, had gotten tossed into a huge furnace for refusing to worship the king's new statue, which was the one he had made from the dream. The statue may have been of the king or of a god, the Bible doesn't say. The furnace is probably a kiln for melting and refining metal. One ancient furnace discovered in Nippur, about 50 miles south of Babylon, was shaped like a railroad tunnel, with a wall sealing one end, heated by charcoal. Ancient kilns could top 1800 Fahrenheit. That's at the high end of a typical cremation chamber today, which goes to 1400 Fahrenheit to 1800 Fahrenheit. The heat actually kills the soldiers who push the Jews inside. But when the king looks into the flames, he sees 4 men walking around. The 4th is described as an angel sent to protect them. Come here, the king calls to them. The 3 Jews step out, and the king forbids anyone from speaking out against their God. And on this side note, they're showing a photo of Belshazzar, which was Babylon's last king. Coded message: Babylon's last king, Belshazzar, is having a party when a hand appears out of nowhere. It writes a cryptic message on the wall. Numbered, weighed, divided. Daniel interprets the meaning. The days of the king and his kingdom are numbered. Belshazzar's value as a ruler has been weighed and found lacking, so his kingdom will be divided among others. Persian invaders arrive and kill him that very night. There's the photo. And one of my personal favorites from the book, Daniel in the Lion's Den. Daniel, servant of the living God, was your God whom you serve so faithfully able to rescue you from the lions? Daniel 6:20. That's the sound of a frantic Persian king yelling into a sealed lion's den. When Babylon falls to Persian invaders in 539 BC, the new ruler springboards elderly Daniel to the top of the political heap. Daniel becomes one of the three leading administrators in charge of the new empire's 120 provinces. The king, according to this story, is Darius the Mede, but this name hasn't turned up among king list for the Medes, who lived in what is now northern Iran, nor has the name shown up on king list among the Persians in southern Iran. Cyrus was the first king of the Persian Empire, so some Bible experts wonder if Darius was just a governor whom Cyrus put in charge of the region. After all, Daniel never calls Darius king of Persia, only the new king of Babylon. Whoever Darius is, the favor he shows Daniel feeds the jealousy of other administrators. They plot Daniel's downfall. It's ironic that they decide God is his Achilles heel. God as the weak link, knowing that Daniel prays 3 times a day. They convince Darius to sign an irrevocable law about prayer. The law requires all citizens to pledge their allegiance to Darius by praying only to him for the next 30 days. Daniel's political enemies catch him praying and turn him in. Panic attack that might describe the king's reaction. He spends all day looking for a loophole in the law. Queen Esther's Persian husband faced a similar dilemma after unwittingly ordering a holocaust of the Jews. He wrote a counter law allowing the Jews to protect themselves and encouraging Persian officials to offer their help, but Darius could hardly order the lions not to chew. God could. Darius orders the sentence carried out, but he doesn't sleep that night. Early the next morning, he rushes to the pit, delighted to find Daniel alive. Furious at the officials who had put Daniel and him through this ordeal, the king decides to give those men a taste of their own medicine, and the lions a taste of nobility. The officials and their families are fed to the lions. In ancient times, the entire family often paid the price for the father's stupidity or act of evil. This prevented a son from growing up and trying to get even. And on this side note, Daniel and his cat's cutthroat palace intrigue lands Daniel in a lion pit overnight. His political enemies had played on the king's vanity, convincing him to sign a law ordering everyone to pray only to him for 30 days or face lions. They turn in Daniel for praying to God. Daniel survives, and the king, angry about being manipulated, sends the connivers to the carnivores. There's the picture of Daniel in the lion's den. Stay blessed. Stay caffeinated. Much love.